I'm your host, Doreen Steenland, and today I'd like to welcome our guest, Molly Watts. So let's just dive right in.
Yeah,
What have you seen over the last few years in terms of alcohol use, especially with the pandemic?
yeah. I think that I don't know many people who didn't express that they started drinking more during the pandemic. People that were already including alcohol in their lives. We saw alcohol sales increased, and especially amongst medical professionals, there was actually a very significant increase. Like 42% of doctors reported experiencing symptoms of burnout and and just stress during the pandemic. And about a quarter of those people said that they drank alcohol to cope with those symptoms. So, and separate from the medical community, women specifically experienced a lot of additional stress during the pandemic, especially for those who are working in the medical community and also taking care of children. And again, we saw a very significant increase, a very big uptick in binge drinking for women. More than 41% of women said that they drank in what would be considered a binge amount during the pandemic. So I think that it's a pretty well accepted idea that the pandemic did not help many people with regards to their alcohol use. It really created a lot of stress for all of us, and in the medical community, clearly even more so. And for many, many people, alcohol is the answer that they turn to try to relieve that stress.
Yes. Oh, I love what you said because I have to just jump in here and say, even for myself, during the pandemic, I felt as though my alcohol intake had increased.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
and so I think that it was because for me personally, that was my coping mechanism for stress. And I think that I know I'm not alone, and you know that I'm not alone, that many of us um, turn to alcohol to cope with our emotions or numb our emotions when we really don't know what to do with them. And
Yeah.
so it's just a way that we have learned to deal with life. And guess what? We're here to tell you today that there are better solutions. And so all of these people that are drinking more, we know that excessive drinking is not good for us. But isn't there some health benefits in moderate drinking?
Well, I would love to be the person to sit here and tell you, yes, there are health
Yeah.
benefits to moderate drinking. Unfortunately, the science does not really support that. And you really wouldn't get that, right, from the news that we kind of hear and these narratives that we've always been told, and the things that we see in terms of social media and television and Hollywood. It's kind of, alcohol is kind of glamorized too, right? So, but the truth of the matter is that there is absolutely no safe amount of alcohol to be added, and no one should be adding alcohol to their lives for any perceived preventative health benefit. The science just does not support it. One of the things that we have with alcohol specifically is that there are no double blind, placebo controlled studies. We cannot take everything out of people's lives and only give them alcohol, right? I mean, that's just not, it's not practical, not in a long-term sense. I mean, we can do a short-term a short-term acute to see what happens to someone when they drink alcohol in a 2-hour time frame, but we certainly can't do that over 2 years. We can't do any longitudinal studies. And so everything that we know about alcohol is observational and associative.
Mhm.
Except then we do see they've made a determination in terms of positive health outcomes when it comes to carcinogenic effect. So cancer, because of what they've seen, they've been made enough studies in terms of animals and other things that they see enough carcinogenic effects that they will actually go to say that alcohol is a known carcinogen. So the science around alcohol, again, what we hear and what we believe about alcohol really does not equate with what the science tells us. Any study that tells you that moderate drinking is healthy or that it's safe or that people have heard, red wine's good for your heart, right? This is
Yeah.
something that I hear all the time.
Yes.
Well, the thing is that no one the studies that actually show us that or that we've actually looked at with regards to people's wine drinking habit do not differentiate between what we call other known oh, now I'm not gonna be able to remember the word, confounders. Sorry, so I call them a minute.
Yeah. It's
Um,
okay.
so confounders would be like how much they exercise, what their food intake is, what their education level is, what their income level is, what their jobs are, what their lifestyles are like, right? All these other things that could contribute to their lifespan. We cannot just isolate alcohol. So that's what those studies say. They didn't really take into effect everything else that could be causing these health benefits, right?
Yeah.
And that's the deal with anything with regards to when we're studying alcohol. It's always going to be associative. It could be seen like, okay, well, people that drank 2 glasses of red wine and lived to be 80, you know, this is what they did. Oh, and by the way, they also ate a highly Mediterranean diet. They worked out 5 times a week. They had low stress, that part of the whole puzzle we're kind of ignoring.
Yes. Oh, so important. And this is what we're seeing a lot. And our media really publicizes those studies that are saying, hey, 1 to 2 glasses of wine is going to help you. It's going to help you be healthier, right? And our society pushing alcohol as a socially acceptable norm
Mm-hmm.
that almost as if you don't drink alcohol, there's something wrong with you.
Oh, for sure. The societal
Yeah.
messaging around alcohol is still very much like if you're not drinking, you're the odd person out. Although I think that's changing to some degree. I do really see the sober curious movement, the mindful drinking, alcohol free. There's such a huge uptick in non-alcoholic beverage industry. We're seeing a mental shift, and I think that's awesome. Um, However, as a woman, you can probably people laugh when you think about this, but you go and if you aren't having a drink, like the first thing people would say to a woman is, oh, are you pregnant? Like there would be no other reason that a
Yeah.
woman would choose to not drink other than the fact that she was pregnant, right? So it's like this whole construct around alcohol it's the assumed thing that you do drink. And if you don't drink, you either have a problem, therefore that's why you're not drinking, or there's some health issue that is causing you to not drink. Like the idea that you would just simply choose to not drink is not really accepted norm right now. Still not. It's changing though.
So good that you're saying that because that was my experience. I went through a period where I was drinking excessively through COVID, and then we had some
Mm-hmm.
medical issues, and that was my way of coping. And I came to this conclusion that I really didn't like who I was becoming. I
Mm-hmm.
did not like my relationship with alcohol. I did not like that I was thinking about it um, at odd times of the day, right? I wouldn't have called myself an alcoholic,
Right.
but it was just consuming too much brain space. I found myself not wanting to go to activities where alcohol was not included, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are little clues that your relationship with alcohol is kind of shifting. And when
Yep.
I chose to stop drinking, my friends, their response was, "What happened?"
Mm-hmm.
Like
Right.
I was pulled over for a DUI, like something horrific
Right.
happened, like I was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver. Something horrific must have happened for me to stop drinking. And they
Right.
couldn't wrap their minds around the fact that I just made an intentional decision that this was not serving me to get me to where I wanted to go in life.
Yeah. I mean, I hear that story obviously what in the work that I do. I hear that story a lot. And kind of the what you're talking about, and while your what it sounds like potentially your use and what you were doing kind of was spurred on by the pandemic, and maybe you wanted to take action right during that. But a lot of times this kind of behavior of kind of having the anxiety ever present, and knowing that you're that kind of cognitive dissonance where you know you're drinking more than you want to be, but you still don't feel like you can stop drinking because you really need it to unwind, right? All of that. We call that gray area drinking.
Mhm.
And gray area drinkers don't have a physical dependence on alcohol, but they also drink typically in non-social situations and wonder why. Like that could be that daily drinking, like coming home from work and just having to have the drink, right?
Mhm.
Um, gray area drinkers often experience that, what we call hangxiety. All right. And
Yeah.
that's a term that comes from actually it's really about what happens in our brains neurochemically. And we can get into that in terms of that idea that we need to drink alcohol to unwind and what's really happening in your brain afterwards. Gray area drinkers can often take breaks from alcohol, but they somehow return back to it and the use pattern starts to tick back up again. And I think the biggest thing, and you kind of mentioned this, is the gray area drinkers have a lot of worry about their drinking. They kind of just, it's ever present. They're always thinking about it. It's just always there in the back of, and I was very similar to that. I drank every day. I drank more than I knew that I wanted to. I came from a parent of being a child of an alcoholic. And so I had this constant worry that I was going to end up like my mom. And yet I kept rules in place in my head. But at a certain point in time, I came to realize that this ever-present anxiety wasn't just like a natural part of, I kind of wrote it off like, oh, that's just who I am because I'm an adult child of an alcoholic and I drink more than I probably know I should. That anxiety is just a natural consequence. I accepted it like that was just who I was. And turns out it doesn't actually work that way. And I didn't have to have that story and I didn't have to keep doing it. And I was able to change that habit. But yeah, so that gray area drinking is something I work with all the time. Nobody that I work with would consider themselves dependent on alcohol. They certainly would never raise their hands and say, I'm an alcoholic. And neither would I. Neither would I have said that about myself.
So good, because I was a gray area drinker. I would stop for periods of time and I'd be fine and not need the drinks. And then as soon as I went back to having a drink, it would escalate, as you said. So this is a cycle. It's a pattern, and it's a pattern that I used to cope for my whole life. And when I learned that there were better ways, everything opened up for me. And another thing I want to point out, what you just said, is that you create these rules for yourself in your head. And that was exhausting. Right? I'd say, okay, I'm not going to drink on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and I'll drink on Thursday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And I created all of these rules, and then something would come up and they'd say, oh, we just did this. Let's have a drink. Let's celebrate. Just one, right? And then one would turn to two. And that was a pattern and a cycle. And that 5 o'clock, what I noticed when I finally started noticing my relationship with alcohol, I actually noticed that when I put the glass of wine down, put the glass by the refrigerator, took the bottle of wine out of the refrigerator to pour it, that I got relaxed before I even had a sip of wine.
Yeah.
So I noticed this and I said, what is that about? Maybe it's not the wine that's relaxing me, right? Maybe my brain is sending these chemical messages that this is what I need. And I thought I received it. And being a coach and learning about habits and stuff, I noticed it. And I said, this is not right. This is right.
Yeah. When we create a habit pattern for something like alcohol affects many neurotransmitters, including dopamine. And really, that's what you're talking about right there is dopamine. Dopamine releases when we have a habit established for something that provides pleasure or helps us avoid pain. or
Mhm.
helps us conserve energy in the brain. It's kind of called the motivational triad.
Yeah.
That when we develop a habit pattern around anything, and it doesn't just, it wouldn't just necessarily be alcohol, right? Some people come home and they eat chocolate, or some people come home and but anything that even people that come home and take a run, who are very, that really get a lot of relief from running, or something like that, they will get that same dopamine release in anticipation of the what our brains look at as a reward,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, so part of establishing, or part of understanding how the brain works and the habit cycle and how that's working in our lives is really what I help people identify too with regards to alcohol. The difference, and I think you kind of talked about that a little bit when you were saying, like, well, I had, I would be alcohol free, and then I'd plan to drink, right, on these other days. Like I'd save my drinking for the weekend. I
Yeah.
just I talk about this a lot with my folks, because there's a difference between the work that I do about having a plan about a drink plan, which I call it a lot. I talk about a doable drink plan and being very intentional with it,
Yeah.
and just planning to drink, right? If we still see alcohol as the uh, avenue to helping us have fun, unwind, relax, if we believe that alcohol is what's going to help us do that, and we don't, then we're still not really, we still have a lot of work to do
Yeah.
on changing that relationship. Because I don't have a day when I like am just going to drink alcohol and
Yeah.
use it as a way to try to change how I'm feeling. That isn't how I work. That isn't how I include alcohol in my life. And, my podcast is called Alcohol Minimalist. The
Yeah.
thing that I think is important is there's a narrative that says that it's impossible, that you have to either be alcohol free, or you have to be, or you just have you're somehow magically able to moderate drinking, or you have problems drinking, right? And it's this very black and white
Mhm.
way of seeing relationships with alcohol. And I would just say that hasn't been my experience at all. Alcohol to me is just like anything else that I'm intentional with in my life. I
Mhm.
choose how I don't, I wouldn't eat candy all day long and expect to feel good and have a healthy relationship with food, right?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of process with alcohol, and people tend to want to put alcohol into a different silo, and like it's not something that you can choose your relationship with. And I just don't believe that at all. It's all about understanding that what you're looking for in the glass, and understanding how you are using alcohol in your life. That's what we need to work on. And that's kind of where the work that you and I do align so closely, because many people turn to alcohol as a way to relieve stress, to relieve anxiety, to relieve that, to blow off steam, to have fun. And when they understand that alcohol isn't really what helps them do that, but it's how they, in my world, I talk a lot about how we use our thoughts to create our feelings. And
Mhm.
it's not the alcohol that helps us change that at all.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really, was really mind blowing for me, because I truly believed, like I was 100% convinced
Mhm.
that I needed to drink to take the edge off.
Yes.
Okay. Like I like not like a little bit believed. I absolutely like that was my, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was what I believed. I have 4 kids. I worked full time. I was like, come on, I need to have a drink to help me unwind. What I came to learn, and really after I started to educate myself on the science of habits, on the science of neuroscience and the brain,
Yeah.
on the science of alcohol itself. Alcohol actually, so in the beginning, at a very low level of, alcohol, 0 to 0.55% is what was considered the therapeutic range of alcohol. For most women, that would be no more than 1 glass of alcohol. With that, your blood alcohol content rises up to 0.055%. At that level, that is where we experience those feelings of relaxation, of euphoria, of that kind of unwinding. Alcohol impacts neurochemistry, impacts neurotransmitters. It down regulates GABA and reverse that. It up regulates GABA and down regulates glutamate, which are basically the two neurotransmitters in the brain that are responsible for turning the brain on and off. So GABA is the inhibitory neurotransmitter. It's the one that kind of, again, slows everything down in your brain. And glutamate's the one that turns it on, right? Excitatory. So alcohol increases GABA and suppresses glutamate. So together, that's where we get this like relaxed feeling. Okay. Again, low level, therapeutic, really okay. The problem is that we believe, right, that if we keep drinking, we're going to keep feeling good, right? But that isn't the way alcohol works. And so once you cross a threshold, and really anything over that 0.055%, and the negative consequences of alcohol are going to keep increasing, and any therapeutic benefit is going to decrease. And what we see is then the brain's basically being turned off, right? And then when alcohol is leaving the system, right, the brain has to catch up. The brain is like, wait a second, I'm all slowed down here. And in its normal state, homeostasis, it's trying to get back to even keel, right? So in an attempt to do that, it floods up glutamate, which is that excitatory neurotransmitter. That's where anxiety comes from. It's this rebound effect. The brain actually is trying to offset what you are bringing into it chemically. It's trying to correct for that. So you can see that every day, if you're continually drinking, every day past that 0.55%, you get this rebound of excitatory neurotransmitters later after the fact, which feels like, so the next day you get this feeling of like, I'm kind of irritable. I'm kind of feeling stressed. It sounds like it would really help. A drink. So that's how the whole cycle works. So it was, for me, it was like this understanding like, oh, so in actuality, this idea that I need alcohol to help me unwind, I actually am causing myself to feel stressed and anxious by my drinking. It's not the other way around.
Yeah. So good. You said so many things there that are
I know. I apologize. A little bit sciencey, a little bit nerdy.
No,
I get
perfect.
I tend to do that. For me, understanding the science and really getting into the brain chemistry and understanding how my brain's habit cycle works helped me challenge my own beliefs around alcohol. And that's really what I think so many of us need to do, is we really need to understand, oh, okay, this thing that I've believed for many, many years, which actually fuels my desire to drink, isn't actually true at all.
Yes. Oh, wow. And I go back often to the quote by Brene Brown. If you can't selectively numb negative emotions without also numbing your positive emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, because that's kind of, when you're stuck in a cycle of trying to escape your life by changing, by using, and, again, this conversation isn't really limited to alcohol. It could be anything that we're using to try to buffer or numb away our feelings, right? And that is a big thing that I work on with people too. Again, I used to be the same way. I constantly ran around at the effect of my feelings. And I tell people all the time, I used to be the most dramatic person, like I just said, like I have 4 kids, I work full time. Like this was the mantra, right? Like this was the way that I fueled my life. And I never really understood the connection between how powerful my own thinking was in creating how I felt. And once I really made that connection, and that's really the work that I do. it's understanding this what I call the behavior map result cycle, this thought, feelings, and actions,
Mhm.
and then also having mindful strategies and tools about how to change the habit with regards to drinking.
Oh, so good. So you're actually helping people learn how to become true alcohol minimalists.
Yes, 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 I am. That's what we do in my world. Not only, because again, it's really and while that sounds like it could be really focused on a number. I do use guidelines that I stick to. I stick to low risk guidelines because that for me is what my mind, again, my very sciencey background, my analytical background allows me to feel like, okay, this is the acceptable level of risk that I'm willing to take, right? That doesn't mean I don't say that's what's going to help for everyone. For some people, being alcohol free is where they feel most peaceful. Totally fine. Some people feel like they can include alcohol even in a little higher level of drinking than mine and feel peaceful with it. That's fine. What I want to make sure is that we're including alcohol in a mindful way. We are including multiple alcohol free days in our week. I encourage everyone to take an alcohol free month each year. This year, I am actually working on what I call my better than half, and I'm 70% alcohol free. I've got a whole roadmap on how we do that. Um, but mostly, it's the connection between what we believe we are getting out of alcohol and actually being able to become better thinkers and better mind managers.
Yes.
That's where the work really is, because then the alcohol just isn't, it becomes a non-factor. And that's what I want for people. It becomes a non-factor. It doesn't matter to me whether or not I'm having a glass of wine planning for a glass of wine on a day or not. I don't have any emotional connection to when I get to drink or don't get to drink, or it just doesn't, it's a non-factor for me.
So good. And I, when I first stopped drinking, I was doing all this white knuckling,
Yeah.
and so as an alcohol minimalist, you have a direct strategy and plan to help people get through this without that white knuckling feeling while changing what's going on inside. Am I correct in what I'm saying?
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
White knuckling doesn't sound very peaceful, does it?
No, it's so
No.
hard.
Yeah. So no, I do not. We are. I mean, so first of all, I'll say that I don't also anticipate if you've been drinking and had a habit of drinking patterns I was for decades, right?
Yeah.
So this did not happen for me overnight. I worked on this relationship with alcohol for about a year and a half,
Yes.
slowly. I take things slower than I think most people. Most people come to work with me and they're like, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. I really try to slow that down because I believe that the key to sustainable change
Mhm.
is meeting ourselves where we're at and taking small steps. And again, building confidence with ourselves. You kind of talked about before about, so this idea of white knuckling your way through things, there are going to be moments of discomfort, especially in the beginning when you've got an established neural pathway
Yes.
of a habit, right? And we're trying to change that. I also think it's important that we question, we don't fuel the story of discomfort, right? So it's like sometimes it's like your thoughts again can be so strong, like, oh, I hate this. Oh, this is awful. Oh, why do I have to deal
Yes.
with this, right? Why do I have to have this feeling of wanting desire drink? Instead of a different story that we could just tell, like, oh, yeah, right. There's this feeling, I'm feeling this feeling of desire because I've literally trained my brain to want wine at this time of day, right? So there's less drama right there. We're just
Yes.
like, oh, yeah. And when we start to really, again, tune into our thoughts around it, we can actually make the process not so painful.